The room was dark except for the faint glow of monitors scattered across the walls. Dr. Lavra Bennett leaned closer to her screen, her fingers flying over the keyboard as lines of data scrolled past. Beside her, Commander Jake Monroe stood with his arms crossed, his sharp eyes scanning the information as it came in. The two of them had been working nonstop for hours, trying to make sense of something that seemed impossible. It had started just a few days ago, when a strange signal was picked up by one of Earth's deep space telescopes. At first, no one thought much of it. Space was full of noise radio waves, bursts of energy, and echoes from distant stars, but this signal was different. It wasn't random, static, or natural interference. It was deliberate, structured, and carried a message. A plea? Lava adjusted her glasses and turned to Jake. This is real, she said, her voice low but steady. It's not some glitch or anomaly. Someone or something is trying to talk to us. Jake nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. He had seen enough during his years in the military to know better than to jump to conclusions, but even he couldn't deny what they were looking at. The signal wasn't like anything humans had ever encountered before. It used patterns and frequencies. Unlike any human language, yet there was an undeniable logic to it. Somehow, whoever sent it knew how to get humanity's attention. The message itself was fragmented, as if parts of it had been lost along the way, but what remained was chilling. It spoke of danger, of destruction on a scale so vast it was almost incomprehensible. There were references to a great force moving through space, consuming everything in its path. Entire star systems wiped out, civilizations erased. And then came the plea, help us. Stop it. Lavra felt a chill run down her spine every time she replayed the recording in her mind. She glanced at Jake again. We have to tell someone about this. Someone who can do something. Jake sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. You mean General Hayes? She nodded. Who else? If what we're hearing is true, this isn't just a scientific curiosity. This is a threat to everyone. We need to act. Fast. General Matthew Hayes didn't look happy. In fact, he looked downright annoyed. His face was stern as he sat behind his desk, listening to Lavra and Jake explain their findings. The office was small and cluttered, filled with maps, charts, and models of Earth's fleet ships. On the wall behind him hung a large emblem of the Galactic Defense Force, a reminder of the power he commanded. So let me get this straight, Hayes said, leaning forward. You're telling me that aliens we've never met before are sending us a distress call because some cosmic monster is coming to destroy them? That's correct, sir, Jake replied, standing tall despite the tension in the room. And based on the trajectory mentioned in the signal, it's heading toward our sector next. Hayes frowned and tapped his pen against the desk. And you think we should believe them? For all we know, this could be a trick, a trap to lure us into some kind of ambush. Lavra stepped forward, her tone calm but firm. With respect, General? I don't think deception fits here. The level of detail in the message suggests genuine fear. These aren't conquerors or invaders, they're survivors asking for help. Hayes studied her for a moment, then leaned back in his chair. Even if... You're right, and I'm not saying we're talking about deploying resources on a massive scale. Ships, personnel, weapons. Do you have any idea what that would cost? Jake spoke up. Sir, if the threat is real, the cost of doing nothing could be far greater. If this ... whatever it is reaches Earth, we might not survive it? Hayes stared at him for a long moment, then sighed heavily. Fine, let's assume you're both right. What exactly do you propose we do? Lavra exchanged a glance with Jake before answering. We send a fleet to investigate? Not just to confirm the threat, but also to offer assistance if possible. If these aliens are truly in danger, we owe it to them and to ourselves to try to help. Hayes drummed his fingers on the desk, clearly weighing the options. Finally, he nodded. All right. I'll authorize the deployment of the main fleet. But under one condition, you go with them, both of you. I want people on the ground who understand this situation better than anyone else. Jake saluted sharply. Understood, sir. Lavra hesitated but eventually nodded. Thank you, General. We won't let you down. Preparations began immediately. The flagship Eclipse was chosen to lead the mission, accompanied by several smaller vessels equipped with advanced weaponry and communication systems. Captain Ryan Scott, a seasoned officer known for his tactical brilliance, was put in charge of the operation. He was briefed on the details of the mission and given strict orders to prioritize Earth's safety above all else. As the fleet prepared to launch, the mood among the crew was a mix of excitement and unease. Lieutenant Emma Carter, the communications officer aboard the Eclipse, found herself pacing nervously in her quarters. She had joined the Galactic Defense Force to explore the universe, not to prepare for war. Yet here she was, part of a mission that could determine the fate of humanity. Emma wasn't the only one feeling anxious. Across the fleet, whispers spread about the nature of the mission. Some believed the aliens were lying, setting a trap for Earth's forces. Others thought the whole thing sounded too far-fetched to be true. But a few, like Lavra, saw it as an opportunity, a chance to prove that humanity could rise above fear and violence to help those in need. On the day of departure, the fleet gathered in orbit around Earth. Thousands of people watched from below. As the ships powered up, their engines glowing brightly against the blackness of space. Lavra stood on the bridge of the Eclipse, watching the planet grow smaller and smaller as they moved farther away. Beside her, Jake gave her a reassuring smile. "We're making history," he said softly. "Let's hope it's the good kind," Lavara replied. The journey into deep space was long and uneventful at first. Days turned into weeks as the fleet traveled faster than light, following the coordinates provided by the alien signal. Along the way, Lavra spent most of her time analyzing the data, searching for clues that might give them an edge once they reached their destination. Jake worked closely with Captain Scott, helping to plan strategies for every possible scenario. But as they drew closer to the source of the signal, strange things began to happen. Instruments malfunctioned without explanation. Crew members reported vivid dreams filled with shadowy figures and ominous whispers. Even the stars outside the windows seemed dimmer somehow, as though the very fabric of space was shifting around. One night, Emma found herself unable to sleep. She wandered onto the observation deck, where she was surprised to find Captain Scott staring out at the void. He turned as she approached, offering a tired smile. "Can't sleep either?" "He?" asked Dot. She shook her head. "Too much on my mind." "Do you think we're doing the right thing?" Scott hesitated, then sighed. "I don't know. All I can do is trust my instincts and hope they're enough." Emma nodded, her gaze drifting back to the endless expanse of stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the darkness, answers awaited. Whether they were ready for them or not remained to be seen. The fleet had been traveling for weeks, and the initial excitement of the mission had given way to a growing sense of unease. The crew aboard the Eclipse and its accompanying ships were beginning to feel the weight of their journey. They were far from Earth now, farther than any human fleet had ever ventured before. The vast emptiness of space stretched endlessly around them, broken only by the occasional glimmer of distant stars. Lieutenant Emma Carter sat at her station on the bridge, her fingers hovering over the controls as she monitored communications. So far there had been nothing, no new signals, no signs of life, just silence. It was unsettling. She glanced up at Captain Ryan Scott, who stood near the main viewport, staring out into the void. His expression was unreadable, but Emma could tell he was deep in thought. He had been quieter than usual lately, spending long hours alone or pacing the corridors of the ship. Emma turned back to her screen, trying to focus on her work. But her mind kept drifting to the strange occurrences that had started happening. Across the fleet, instruments would suddenly malfunction without explanation, only to reset themselves moments later. Crew members reported vivid dreams filled with shadowy figures and faint whispers. Even the air felt heavier somehow, as though the very fabric of space was pressing down on them. She shook her head, forcing herself to concentrate. "Focus, Emma," she muttered under her breath. But it was hard not to feel a creeping sense of dread. One day, as the fleet approached the coordinates provided by the alien signal, something changed. A faint blip appeared on the radar, a derelict ship drifting silently in the darkness. The crew scrambled to get a closer look, and soon the vessel came into view. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. Its sleek, metallic surface shimmered faintly, reflecting the light of a dying star nearby. Strange symbols covered its hull, glowing softly in hues of blue and green. Captain Scott ordered a team to board the alien craft and investigate. Dr. Lavra Bennett volunteered immediately, eager to uncover whatever secrets the ship might hold. Jake Monroe joined her, along with a small group of engineers and security personnel. As they suited up and prepared to leave the Eclipse, Scott gave them a final warning. "Stay alert," he said, his voice firm. "We don't know what we're dealing with here. If anything feels off, you pull back immediately, understood?" The team nodded, and moments later they were aboard the alien vessel. The interior was dimly lit, with strange panels lining the walls. The air smelled metallic, tinged with an unfamiliar scent that made Laura's skin prickle. She moved cautiously, her scanner held out in front of her as she analyzed the environment. It didn't take long for them to find something significant. In the heart of the ship, they discovered a chamber filled with advanced technology. Holographic displays flickered weakly, showing fragmented images and data streams. Laura's eyes widened as she realized what they were looking at. Recordings of the aliens' last moments. The footage was haunting. It showed a species vastly different from humans, tall, slender beings with luminous eyes and translucent skin. Their voices echoed through the chamber, speaking in a language that sounded like music. Despite the language barrier, the tone of their words was unmistakable: fear, desperation, and sorrow. Lavra worked quickly, downloading as much of the data as she could. The recordings revealed that the aliens had been fleeing from something, a massive cosmic entity they called the Void Warden. According to the logs, the Void Warden had once been a guardian of balance in the universe, tasked with maintaining harmony between stars and planets. But something had gone wrong. The entity had become corrupted, driven mad by forces beyond comprehension. Now it consumed everything in its path, leaving destruction in its wake. As Lavra absorbed the information, a chill ran down her spine. The recordings ended with a chilling warning. The Void Warden was heading toward Earth Sector next. Back aboard the Eclipse, the team gathered in the briefing room to share their findings. Lavra stood at the front, projecting the downloaded data onto a large screen. The crew listened in stunned silence as she explained what they had learned. "We can't ignore this," Lavra said, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "If the Void Warden is real, and I believe it is, we need to prepare ourselves. This isn't just about us anymore. It's about protecting Earth and possibly the entire galaxy." Captain Scott leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "What do you suggest we do?" "We're talking about something that destroyed entire civilizations. How do we even begin to fight it?" Lavra hesitated, then shook her head. "I don't think fighting is the answer. From what I've seen, violence might only make it worse. The Void Warden wasn't always destructive. It was meant to be a guardian. Maybe there's a way to calm it, to restore its original purpose." Jake nodded slowly. "It's worth considering. But how do we even start? Do we have enough time to figure it out?" Before anyone could respond, General Hayes appeared on the main screen, his face stern as always. "Dr. Bennett, Captain Scott," he began, his tone clipped. "I've received your report. I want to remind you both that your primary objective is to protect Earth. If this threat is real, and I'm still not convinced it is, you need to neutralize it. That means using every resource at your disposal." Scott frowned. "General, with respect, Dr. Bennett believes that attacking the Void Warden could provoke it further. We may need to consider alternative approaches." Hayes's expression hardened. "Alternative approaches won't save lives if this thing reaches Earth. You have your orders, Captain. Follow them." The transmission cut off, leaving the room in tense silence. Lavra looked at Scott, her expression pleading. "We can't just rush into this blindly. If we attack without understanding what we're dealing with, we could make things worse." Scott sighed and rubbed his temples. "I know, but Hayes isn't going to give us much leeway. If we defy his orders, we risk losing support and possibly our command. Emma spoke up, her voice quiet but firm. What if we try both? Prepare for the worst while exploring other options. That way we're ready for anything. Scott considered her words for a moment, then nodded. All right, we'll proceed carefully. Lavra, I want you to keep analyzing the data, see if there's anything else we can use. Jake, coordinate with the engineering team to fortify our defenses. And Emma, monitor all communications. If there's even a hint of activity, I want to know about it immediately. The crew dispersed, each carrying out their assigned tasks. But as they worked, the tension aboard the ship continued to grow. The Void Warden loomed large in everyone's minds, an unseen threat that seemed almost mythical in its power. Yet, the evidence was undeniable, it was real, and it was coming. Days passed, and the fleet drew closer to the edge of the dying star system where the alien ship had been found. Strange phenomena became more frequent. Instruments malfunctioned more often, and the dreams plaguing the crew grew more intense. Some began to question whether they were truly alone in the vastness of space or if the Void Warden was already watching them. One night, Emma found herself unable to sleep again. She wandered onto the observation deck, where she was surprised to find Lavra standing alone, gazing out at the stars. The doctor's face was pale, her eyes distant. Can't sleep either? Emma asked softly. Lavra shook her head. Too much, too. Think about too much riding on what we do next. Emma stepped closer, her voice gentle. Do you really think we can stop it? The Void Warden, I mean. Lavra hesitated, then sighed. I don't know. But I do know that we have to try. If we don't, who will? Emma nodded, her gaze drifting back to the endless expanse of space. Somewhere out there, beyond the darkness, answers awaited. Whether they were ready for them or not remained to be seen. The fleet had reached the edge of the dying star system, and the tension aboard the Eclipse was palpable. Everyone knew they were getting closer to the Void Warden, but no one could say for sure what they would find or how they would handle it. The crew moved about their duties with quiet determination, though fear lingered in the corners of every conversation. Captain Ryan Scott stood on the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back as he stared out at the void. He had spent countless hours weighing their options, torn between following General Hayes' orders and trusting Dr. Lavra Bennett's instincts. On one side was the military directive, prepare for war, neutralize the threat at all costs. The other was the hope that understanding and diplomacy might offer a solution without bloodshed. The weight of leadership pressed heavily on him, and he found himself questioning whether he was making the right decisions. Lieutenant Emma Carter sat at her station, monitoring the ship's sensors. She glanced up at Scott occasionally, noticing the lines of stress etched into his face. She wanted to say something to reassure him, but she didn't know what words could possibly help. Instead, she focused on her work, scanning the surrounding space for any sign of movement or activity. So far, there was nothing unusual, just the eerie stillness of the cosmos. Lavra and Jake Monroe worked tirelessly in the science lab, poring over the data recovered from the alien ship. They had pieced together fragments of information, uncovering more details about the Void Warden. It was clear now that the entity wasn't simply a mindless force of destruction. It operated with a kind of twisted logic, driven by corruption rather than malice. Lavra believed this meant there might be a way to reason with it, or at least calm it, but she struggled to explain how. We need time, Lavra said, frustration creeping into her voice as she flipped through holographic displays. If we could study its patterns, maybe we could find a frequency or signal that resonates with it. Something to bring it back to balance. Jake nodded slowly, though skepticism lingered in his eyes. Even if we figure that out, how do we get close? Enough to try? This thing wiped out entire civilizations. What makes you think it'll give us a chance? I don't know, Lavra admitted, but I can't believe violence is the only answer. If we attack first, we risk provoking it, and then what? We're not ready for a fight like that. Their debate was interrupted when Captain Scott entered the lab. His expression was grim as he addressed them. General Hayes has sent another transmission. He's demanding an update, and he's not happy with our lack of action. He wants us to move forward with an assault plan." Laura's heart sank. "An assault? Against something we barely understand? That's reckless." Scott sighed, running, a hand through his hair. "I agree. But Hayes isn't interested in alternatives. He sees this as a direct threat to Earth and wants it dealt with immediately." Jake crossed his arms, his tone sharp. "So what are we supposed to do? Follow orders and march straight into disaster?" Scott hesitated, then shook his head. "No, not yet. I've decided to send a scout ship ahead to gather more intelligence. If we can confirm the Void Warden's location and behavior, we'll have a better idea of how to proceed." Lavra looked at him, surprised. "You're going against Hayes' orders?" "I'm buying us time," Scott replied firmly. "If we act without understanding what we're facing, we're putting everyone at risk, including Earth. This mission is dangerous enough without rushing into it blindly." The scout ship, named the Vanguard, was small but fast, designed for stealth and reconnaissance. A team of 4 volunteers prepared to embark on the risky mission, knowing full well the dangers involved. Among them was Lieutenant Emma Carter, who insisted on joining despite Scott's initial reluctance. "I'm the best person for this," Emma argued. "I know the communication systems inside and out. If we pick up any signal or anomaly, I'll be able to interpret it faster than anyone else." Scott finally relented, impressed by her determination. "All right, but stay safe. If things go south, you pull out immediately." "No heroics," Emma nodded, her resolve unwavering. As the Vanguard launched from the Eclipse, the rest of the fleet watched anxiously, hoping the small ship wouldn't disappear into the darkness forever. The journey was tense. The Vanguard moved silently through space, its engines muted to avoid detection. Emma monitored the sensors closely, her fingers flying over the controls as she scanned for signs of the Void Warden. The others kept watch, their weapons ready. In case they encountered hostility, hours passed with no results. Just as doubt began to creep in, the sensors picked up something, a faint disturbance in the fabric of space. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but unmistakably unnatural. Emma adjusted the equipment, narrowing the focus until the source became clearer. "There," she whispered, pointing to a swirling mass of dark energy in the distance. "That's it. That's the Void Warden." The team stared in awe as the entity came into view. It was massive, larger than any planet, pulsating with an otherworldly light. Its form shifted constantly, resembling a living storm of shadows and stars. Despite its beauty, there was an undeniable sense of menace about it, as if the very air around them grew colder just looking at it. Emma recorded everything, her hands trembling slightly as she transmitted the data back to the Eclipse. "We need to get closer," she said. "If we can analyze its emissions, we might be able to decode its frequencies." Her teammate, a young engineer named Daniel, frowned. "Are you sure that's wise? We're already pushing our luck being this close. We won't get another chance," Emma insisted. "This could be the key to stopping it." Reluctantly, Daniel agreed, and the Vanguard edged nearer to the Void Warden. As they approached, strange sensations washed over the crew, waves of dizziness, flashes of fragmented images, and a deep, echoing hum that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Emma clenched her teeth, fighting to stay focused. As she gathered readings, suddenly the ship shuddered violently. Alarms blared as the Void Warden reacted to their presence, tendrils of dark energy reaching out toward them. Panic gripped the crew as the Vanguard struggled to maintain control. "Pull back!" Daniel shouted. "Now!" Emma hesitated, unwilling to leave until she had secured the final piece of data. But the ship lurched again, throwing her off balance. Realizing they had no choice, she initiated the retreat sequence. Guiding the Vanguard away from the entity as quickly as possible, back aboard the Eclipse, the crew erupted into cheers as the Vanguard returned safely. Captain Scott greeted Emma personally, relief evident on his face. "You did good," he said. "What did you find?" Emma handed him the data, her voice tinged with both excitement and dread. "It's incredible and terrifying. The Void Warden emits harmonic frequencies that seem to resonate with its core. If we can replicate those frequencies, we might be able to influence it. Scott turned to Lavra, who was already reviewing the information. Do you think this could work? Lavra nodded slowly, her mind racing. It's a long shot, but it's our best option. If we can create a counter-frequency, we might be able to calm it, or at least distract it long enough to protect Earth. Jake frowned. And if it doesn't work? Then we'll have to rely on Plan B, Scott said grimly. But let's pray it doesn't come to that. As preparations began for the next phase of the mission, tensions aboard the fleet reached a boiling point. General Hayes issued another transmission, furious that Scott had delayed the assault. You're playing with fire, Captain, Hayes warned. If you fail, the consequences will fall squarely on your shoulders. Scott met the general's glare with steely determination. Understood, sir. But sometimes taking a risk is the only way to succeed. Hayes cut the connection, leaving Scott to face the judgment of his crew. Some supported his decision, believing in the potential of Laura's plan. Others questioned whether he was putting too much faith in an untested theory. Despite the division, Scott remained resolute, determined to see the mission through in the days that followed. The crew worked around the clock to prepare the harmonic signal. Strange phenomena continued to plague the fleet, growing more intense. As they neared the Void Warden, instruments malfunctioned, dreams became nightmares, and whispers echoed through the corridors. Yet, amidst the chaos, a glimmer of hope remained, the belief that humanity could rise above fear and find a way to coexist with even the most incomprehensible forces. Somewhere, beyond the stars, the Void Warden loomed, waiting. And aboard the Eclipse, Captain Scott and his crew readied themselves for the greatest challenge of their lives. The Eclipse and its accompanying fleet moved cautiously toward the Void Warden, their engines humming softly as they positioned themselves for the critical moment. The plan was risky broadcasting a harmonic signal directly at the massive entity in hopes of calming it, but it was the only option left. If it failed, humanity's most powerful war fleet would be forced to engage in a battle that no one truly believed they could win. Captain Ryan Scott stood on the bridge, his jaw tight with tension. He had spent hours reviewing every detail of the operation, double-checking calculations, and ensuring the crew was prepared for whatever might happen. Still, doubt lingered in the back of his mind. Was he making the right choice? Could they really trust that this fragile thread of HOPA, sound wave designed to resonate with an alien consciousness, would work? Or was he leading everyone into disaster? Lieutenant Emma Carter sat at her station, her fingers hovering over the controls. She had been instrumental in gathering the data needed to create the harmonic signal, and now she was responsible for broadcasting it. Her heart raced as she stared at the screen in front of her, waiting for the order to begin. Behind her, Dr. Lavra Bennett monitored the situation alongside Jake Monroe, both of them watching intently for any sign of reaction from the Void Warden. Ready? Scott asked, glancing at Emma. She nodded, swallowing hard. Ready? Then let's do this, he said, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. Broadcast the signal. Emma pressed the button, and the Eclipse's speakers emitted a low, resonant hum. It wasn't loud, but it filled the ship with an eerie vibration that seemed to seep into everyone's bones. Outside, the harmonic waves spread outward, invisible, threads of sound reaching toward the swirling mass of energy that was the Void Warden. At first, nothing happened. The entity continued to pulse and shift, its vast form shimmering like a storm cloud made of stars. But then, slowly, it began to react. Tendrils of dark energy stretched outward, writhing and twisting as if searching for the source of the disturbance. The crew watched in stunned silence as the Void Warden's movements grew more erratic. Almost angry, Lavra leaned closer to her monitor, analyzing the readings. It's responding, she said, her voice trembling slightly. But I'm not sure how. Is it attacking or... Before she could finish, the entire fleet shuddered violently. Alarms blared as the Void Warden unleashed a burst of energy, sending shockwaves rippling through space. The Eclipse rocked under the impact, throwing some crew members off balance. Sparks flew from damaged consoles and smoke filled the air. "We're losing power!" shouted one of the engineers. "Shields are down to 60%. Scott grabbed hold of a railing to steady himself, his eyes fixed on the viewport. The Void Warden loomed larger than ever, its chaotic movements growing more intense. For a moment, it seemed like the plan had failed. The entity was preparing to unleash destruction on an unimaginable scale. "Keep broadcasting," Scott ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Don't stop!" Emma hesitated, her hands shaking as she adjusted the signal. "Shouldn't we pull back?" "This isn't working." "No," Lavra interjected, her tone desperate. "We can't give up yet. It's reacting. It just needs time to process. Trust me." Jake stepped forward, placing a reassuring hand on Emma's shoulder. "Do what she says. We've come too far too. Quit now." Emma took a deep breath and steadied herself, focusing all her attention on maintaining the broadcast. The hum of the harmonic signal grew louder, filling the ship with a strange, otherworldly resonance. Outside, the Void Warden continued to writhe, its tendrils lashing out wildly. But gradually, something changed. Its movements slowed, becoming less aggressive. The swirling mass of energy began to contract, shrinking inward as if retreating into itself. "What's happening?" Scott asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I think it's working," Lavra replied, her eyes wide with awe. "The frequency must be stabilizing its core. It's calming down." For several tense minutes, the crew watched as the Void Warden transformed before their eyes. The dark, chaotic storm faded, replaced by a serene glow that pulsed gently, almost rhythmically. The oppressive weight that had hung over the fleet since entering the dying star system lifted, leaving behind a sense of peace that felt almost unnatural. "It's gone," Jake said finally, breaking the silence. Whatever it was, it stopped. Scott exhaled slowly, relief washing over him. "Good work, everyone. You did it." The aftermath of the encounter left the crew shaken but triumphant. Repairs were underway across the fleet, and though the ships had sustained damage, none had been lost. The Void Warden remained in the distance, now a quiet, glowing presence rather than a looming threat. No one knew exactly what had happened, or why the harmonic signal had worked, but for now, the immediate danger had passed. Back aboard the Eclipse, General Matthew Hayes appeared on the main screen, his expression unreadable. "Report," he demanded. Scott stepped forward, his posture straight and confident. "Mission accomplished, sir." "The Void Warden has been neutralized for now." Hayes raised an eyebrow. "Neutralized?" Lavra stepped into view, explaining the use of the harmonic signal and its effect on the entity. Hayes listened silently, his face betraying little emotion. When she finished, he nodded slowly. An unorthodox approach, but effective. "Good job." Despite his praise, there was an edge to his tone that made Scott uneasy. "Thank you, sir. Permission to return to Earth?" "Granted," Hayes replied. "But don't expect a hero's welcome. Your insubordination will be addressed upon your arrival." The transmission ended, leaving the crew to process what had just happened. Some celebrated quietly, grateful to have survived such a harrowing ordeal. Others reflected on the enormity of what they had faced and overcome. For Lavra, the experience reinforced her belief in the importance of understanding rather than destroying. For Scott, it was a reminder of the heavy burden of leadership and the value of trusting his instincts. Later that evening, Scott found himself alone on the observation deck, staring out at the stars. The Void Warden was still visible in the distance, its gentle glow a stark contrast to the terror it had once inspired. He couldn't help but wonder what secrets it still held and whether humanity was truly ready to face them. Emma joined him after a while, holding 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to him with a small smile. "Thought you could use this." "Thanks," Scott said, taking the cup gratefully. "How are you holding up?" "I'm okay," she replied, leaning against the railing beside him. "Still processing." "Everything, I guess." "It's not every day you save the galaxy, huh?" Scott chuckled softly. "Something tells me this won't be the last time we deal with something like this." Emma nodded, her gaze drifting to the Void Warden. Do you think we'll ever understand it? Really understand it? I don't know, Scott admitted, but maybe that's not the point. Maybe it's enough to know that we tried to listen, instead of jumping straight to violence. They stood in silence for a while, sipping their coffee and watching the endless expanse of space stretch out before them. Despite the challenges they had faced and those that undoubtedly lay ahead there, was a sense of hope. Humanity had taken a step forward, proving that even in the face of overwhelming odds, compassion and ingenuity could prevail. As the fleet began its journey back to Earth, strange phenomena persisted, though they were far less intense than before. Instruments occasionally flickered, and some crew members reported lingering dreams filled with whispers and shadowy figures. But these occurrences no longer felt threatening. Instead, they seemed almost like echoes of the Void Warden's gratitude. Lavara spent her days reviewing the data collected during the mission, determined to learn as much as possible about the entity. She believed that understanding the Void Warden's nature could unlock new possibilities, not just for humanity, but for the universe as a whole. Jake supported her efforts, helping wherever he could, though he remained cautious about getting too close to forces beyond human comprehension. For Captain Scott, the mission marked a turning point. He had defied orders, risked his career, and gambled the lives of his crew on an unproven theory. Yet in doing so, he had also shown that sometimes taking a chance on peace was worth the risk. As the eclipse approached Earth, he allowed himself a rare moment of optimism, imagining a future where humanity's greatest strength wasn't its weapons, but its ability to listen and learn. Somewhere beyond the stars, the Void Warden drifted. Quietly, its purpose unknown, but its message clear. Even in the darkest corners of the cosmos, there is always room for redemption. The eclipse and its fleet arrived back at Earth to a world caught between celebration and controversy. News of their encounter with the Void Warden had spread quickly, thanks to leaked reports and fragmented transmissions intercepted by media outlets. Some hailed the crew as heroes who had saved humanity from destruction. Others questioned the choices made during the mission, particularly Captain Ryan Scott's decision to defy General Matthew Hayes' orders. The debate raged across news channels, social media, and government chambers. Dividing public opinion, Scott stood on the bridge of the eclipse, watching as Earth grew larger in the viewport. He felt a mix of emotions: relief at being home, pride in what they had accomplished, and apprehension about what lay ahead. General Hayes had already issued a formal summons for Scott, Lavra Bennett, and key members of the crew to appear before a military tribunal. The outcome of that meeting would determine not only their futures, but also how humanity approached similar situations in the years to come. Lieutenant Emma Carter sat at her station, quietly observing the planet below. She had never imagined her role in the Galactic Defense Force would lead to something so monumental or so divisive. Her actions aboard the scout ship Vanguard had earned her recognition, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the mission was far from over. The whispers and strange dreams that had plagued the crew during their journey persisted, faint but noticeable reminders that the Void Warden's influence lingered even after they thought it was gone. Dr. Lavara Bennett spent most of her time in the science lab, analyzing every scrap of data collected during the mission. She believed the harmonic signal had done more than calm the entity. It had created a connection, however fleeting, between humanity and the Void Warden. The recordings showed subtle changes in its energy patterns, almost like a form of communication. Lavra hoped to decipher those patterns further, convinced that understanding the entity could pave the way for future encounters with unknown forces. Jake Monroe assisted Lavra whenever he could, though his thoughts often drifted to the philosophical implications of what they had faced. "It makes you wonder," he said one evening as they reviewed holographic displays. "If something like the Void Warden exists, what else is out there, and are we ready to deal with it?" Lavra nodded, her expression thoughtful. "We've barely scratched the surface of what's possible. But maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it means we have room to grow to become better." General Hayes wasted no time calling the tribunal into session. The hearing took place in a secure facility deep within Earth's military headquarters. Scott, Lavra, and several senior crew members were seated at a long table facing a panel of high-ranking officers, including Hayes himself. The atmosphere was tense. With cameras recording every word for later review, Hayes opened the proceedings with a stern tone. Captain Scott, your actions during this mission have raised serious concerns about chain of command and operational protocol. You knowingly disobeyed direct orders and pursued an unapproved strategy. Do you have anything to say in your defense? Scott stood, his posture straight and composed. Yes, sir. With respect, the situation we faced required flexibility and creativity. Following standard protocols would have led to unnecessary loss of life not just among our crew, but potentially across the galaxy. Dr. Bennett's theory offered a nonviolent solution, one that ultimately succeeded where conventional methods might have failed. Hayes leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. And if it hadn't succeeded, what then? Then I would have accepted full responsibility for my decisions, Scott replied without hesitation. But I believed and still believe that taking a chance on peace was worth the risk. Murmurs rippled through the room as others weighed his words. Lavra stepped forward, addressing the panel directly. The Void Warden wasn't just a threat, it was a lesson. It showed us that violence isn't always the answer. By listening and adapting, we found a way to coexist instead of escalating conflict. That's something we should embrace moving forward. Her statement sparked a heated discussion among the officers. Some argued that Scott's insubordination set a dangerous precedent, while others praised him for prioritizing diplomacy over aggression. After hours of deliberation, the panel reached a verdict. Scott and his crew would face no formal punishment, provided they submitted detailed reports on the mission and assisted in developing new protocols for handling extraterrestrial threats. Hayes didn't look pleased, but he accepted the decision. As the tribunal concluded, he pulled Scott aside privately. You got lucky this time, he said gruffly. Don't let it happen again. Yes, sir, Scott replied, though his tone suggested he wouldn't hesitate to make the same call. If necessary, in the weeks that followed, life began to return to normal, or as close to normal as it could be after such an extraordinary event. Public opinion shifted in favor of the crew as more details emerged about the Void Warden and the risks they had taken to neutralize it. Lavra became a symbol of interstellar diplomacy, invited to speak at conferences and universities around the world. Her message was simple yet powerful. Humanity's greatest strength lies not in its weapons but in its ability to adapt, learn, and connect with others, even those vastly different from itself. Emma returned to her duties aboard the Eclipse, though she found herself changed by the experience. She had always been curious about the universe, but now she felt a deeper sense of purpose. Each transmission she monitored, each signal she decoded, carried the potential to uncover another piece of the cosmic puzzle. She began working closely with Lavra, helping analyze the data from the Void Warden and searching for signs of other intelligent life. Jake stayed by Laura's side as well, serving both as a sounding board for her theories and as a voice of caution when her ideas grew too ambitious. Together, they formed a dynamic partnership, balancing optimism with pragmatism as they explored the mysteries of the cosmos. As for Scott, he resumed his role as captain of the Eclipse, though he remained acutely aware of the weight of leadership. He knew that the decisions he made affected not only his crew but potentially the entire galaxy. Yet he also felt a renewed sense of hope, knowing that humanity had proven capable of rising above fear and violence to seek understanding. One evening, Scott joined Emma on the observation deck, where she was reviewing a series of faint signals detected near the edge of explored space. Anything interesting? He asked, leaning against the railing beside her. She smiled, holding up a datapad. Possibly. These readings are unusual, different from anything we've seen before. Could be interference or... She trailed off, her eyes gleaming with excitement. Or it could be another first contact, Scott chuckled softly. Looks like we've got more work to do. Emma nodded, her gaze drifting back to the stars. Yeah, but that's what we signed up for, right? They stood in silence for a while, watching the endless expanse of space stretch out before them. Despite the challenges they had faced and those that undoubtedly lay ahead, there was a sense of purpose. Humanity had taken its first steps into a universe filled with wonders and dangers alike. And as long as there were people willing to listen, learn, and take risks for the greater good, there was no limit to what they could achieve. Somewhere beyond the stars, the Void Warden drifted quietly, its story far from finished. But for now, it served as a reminder that even in the darkest corners of the cosmos, redemption and unity were always possible, if only humanity had the courage to reach for them.